What is up, Edison Duelists? This is Dionysus, aka Young Puds, coming at you guys on this beautiful, beautiful Thursday with some more shameless hypebeast Gigavise content. So what I want to talk to you about today is actually alternate win condition decks. We all have been in that situation where you queue up onto ladder expecting to play some nice, fair, honest Yu-Gi-Oh with your Gigavise deck, and what do you run into but some sort of strange and unfamiliar concept that your opponent has put together, trying to win the game doing something other than controlling the board and attacking your life points with their monsters after they've destroyed your monsters. It can be a frustrating experience, but the important thing is to stay calm, take in information, formulate a plan, and then execute and win the game. So what I have for you today is 3 matches against alternate win con decks, and let's dive into them and see if we are able to follow that advice I just gave, or if we just get completely rocked and blown out by these unexpected decks. I also think that, say what you will about these alternate win condition decks, they're really cool. It's nice to see people flexing their creative muscles and trying something a little different. I also think that while it's frustrating to lose to them, it is pretty engaging to play against them. You're having to come up with a new plan, sometimes on the fly. A couple of these decks were decks that I knew existed, but I had never really played against with Gigavise, and one of them was something that I didn't even know was a thing, so I really had to come up with a plan on the fly. So let's see how I did. Here we are going to be on the draw against Final Countdown Frogs. What a cool combination. Looks like the deck is trying to fire Final Countdown and then stall out with a Duplog, Waboku, and probably Threatening Roar as well. So we are just going to draw and pass with a relatively weak hand, obviously not wanting to commit the Cyber Valley into an unknown board, and then our opponent fires the Final Countdown, and my heart sinks. I'm like, oh, all right, here we go. No normal Yu-Gi-Oh for me. And then I see Swap Frog, so right away I know what my opponent is up to. They're on some sort of Frog Final Countdown strategy. The gears start turning in my head. I'm thinking, okay, Duplock is going to be their main kind of win condition, sticking a Duplock. And I got to tell you, folks, Gigavise is fantastic at answering a Duplock. So I am thinking, all right, well, let's strike while the iron is hot. I'm assuming our opponent does have a Battle Fader. So I just want to get some board presence right away. Maybe chew through the Battle Fader, at least get their life points a little lower. We'll see what we can do. I am going to go for the Gigaplant here. Normally Titanial is better against frogs, but the Gigaplant I am fairly confident is going to be able to survive. Final Countdown decks are generally not interacting so much with your board. So I'm thinking the Gigaplant's going to survive, and that is going to be my ticket into winning later on. Here our opponent is going to still be opening a little slowly. They're going to bring out the Treeborn Frog as a nice little blocker, but they also have plenty of time with those 2 Wabakus in hand. They're going to fire the Moray of Greed to draw some more cards, set the Wabaku, set the Dupe Frog. On our turn, we are going to go into Titanial now, on the off chance that our opponent is playing some sort of discard trap. We're going to try and clear their field, but they are going to hit us with the Wabaku. Back on their turn, they do find Substitute, so they're going to cycle through their whole deck here really quite a bit, especially with their Pot of Avarice, Salvage, and Moray of Greed. So their engine is really fully online. They're seeing everything. Look at that. They try and send a Fishborg Blaster. Fortunately, we do catch that. You cannot send Fishborg Blaster off of Swap Frog. It is a fish, not an aqua. Nevertheless, our opponent is going to Moray of Greed, draw some more cards. They have a 1-for-1, so hypothetically they do have Fishborg access if that is what they want. Even if they were trying to maybe execute a Colossal Fighter Armory Arm OTK between Threatening Roar and Titanial, we can stop that. So our opponent is continuing to cycle through their frogs, and they are very wisely going to get that Substitute off the field. So this attack position Dupe Frog is not a liability here. They are going to set a Wabaku and then pass it back to us. Now here with this board, I am thinking that I want to use Heavy Storm now. I want to force them to use the Wabaku if that is what it is. If it's something else, obviously I want to remove it, but I don't want to find myself in a position where I commit to clearing a Duplock and then our opponent flips Wabaku when we try and attack for game. That's just not going to be a good spot for us to be in. they could be able to avarice and establish a new dupe block, so we definitely can't have that. Instead, I am just going to Brain Control to remove one of the dupe frogs and draw some cards off of Cyber Valley. I get a very good draw here with this Mind Control. I have the Mark of the Rose, I have the DDR, so I really have everything that I need, and I just want to set myself up to win on the next turn. So I'm going to summon another Gigaplant and then give it back to our opponent. Crucially, here in this matchup, we're not firing the Upstart Goblin. I don't want to give my opponents any more life points than I have to. We already have them in a very close to death situation. You'll see what we do here, but we can close out the game with just one attack. And I want to keep that to be a possibility. And as you can also see, we have a very strong hand. I don't need to find anything else. I just need to, keep chewing through all of their defensive traps and then close out the game. So here, speaking of defense, our opponent is going to switch that dupe frog into defense position, bring out a Treeborn frog, and set that flip-flop frog that they drew. I am assuming that that is a set flip-flop frog. Pretty safe assumption against a frog deck like this. And I'm sure our opponent is thinking, all right, well, let's see how you crack this board. And I am trying to play around everything. I want to play around Battle Fader. I want to play around Gores. So we are going to go ahead and Minecon one of the dupe frogs to make an Armory Arm. And we're going to equip the Armory Arm to Titanial. And then we're going to normal summon the second Gigaplant to bring back Lonefire and go into Copy Plant. And then here we are going to make Black Rose Dragon. And then Black Rose is going to use its second effect to put that dupe frog into attack position, reduce its attack to 0, and now we are going to be able to swing over that with Titanial for game through Battle Fader, which our opponent didn't even have anyways. So we're going to side up just a little bit and go into game 2. I do think this final Countdown Frog deck is definitely really, really scary, but fortunately for us, we are probably the best deck at outing dupe block between Mistworm, between our theft spells, between our discard traps, between Black Rose. The Gigavise deck just has so many clean answers to dupe block. And I mean, frankly, folks, there's a lot of times where my opponent will put up a dupe block and I have like an OK out to it, and I won't out it immediately. I'll just let the frog player feel like, okay, well, I'm safe now. Let me try and get some more resources. And meanwhile, I'm finding the one or two key cards to make sure I have game through their dupe block. So speaking of finding key cards, we are going to Gold Sark for a Lonefire Blossom just to try and get things up and running. And our opponent did set up a Swap Frog to get Substitute in the graveyard on turn 1, as well as Treeborn. And they have also found the final countdown. So, cue the U-uhm music and let us see if we can beat the clock and win. Our opponent is just going to go ahead and just directly tribute summon Death's Frog here. I think that's a little interesting. Probably a little concerned about our back row, wanting to play around that. Speaking of our back row, though, we are going to go ahead and fire the Raigeki Break, discarding Titanial. I'm assuming it is something like Threatening Roar, which of course it is, and that is going to give us the ability to attack freely on this next turn. Unfortunately, our hand isn't super good. We're not having quite enough damage to close out the game. So instead, I am just going to Titanial over the Death Frog, and then next turn, I am going to go ahead and get the Lonefire off of Sark. That is going to carry us into... Here, our opponent is going to go ahead and draw another Salvage for turn. So they are definitely having Substitute access. They are just going to normal summon the Swap Frog here. Oh, it looks like they need to send another frog to graveyard to turn on Salvage. That makes sense. So they are going to do just that. They're going to send the Unifrog, and then they are going to Salvage to get Unifrog and Substitute back to their hand. They do have the Wabaku, so even if they're not putting up a Dupe Frog block on this turn, they are still going to be able to survive doing a relatively weak play like Unifrog. Now, Unifrog here is going to clear the Miracle Fertilizer, but we got our value off of it. It did its job. It summoned the Titanial. And then our opponent is going to set the one Threatening Roar, and we are going to get Lonefire Blossom to our hand. And we are just going to go right on ahead and summon the Lonefire Blossom. Again, I'm assuming these back row are not real. I'm assuming they're something like Waboku, which of course it is. So we are just going to attack immediately and force our opponent to commit their Waboku right away. It looks like they want to keep those 2 monsters already on the field, as opposed to just having one by bringing back Treeborn Frog, preserve their life points a little, and then that's also going to give them excellent fuel for a very big Substitute turn. And that is just what we're going into. Our opponent is going to Substitute to begin cycling through their deck. They are going to hit us for 400 briefly, and then main phase 2, finish their big old cycle, salvaging back for Unifrog and Treeborn, discarding the Treeborn to summon out Swap Frog, sending Substitute. Swap Frog is going to bounce itself back to hand and then summon itself again. Once again, our opponent tries to send Fishborg Blaster, and we stop them from doing that. Here they are going to Pot of Avarice to shuffle all their monsters back into their deck, try and draw some more protection traps. Instead, they just draw Treeborn Frog and Moray of Greed. Still very easy to get that live. They could have just bounced the Swap Frog to fire the Moray of Greed, but instead they choose to develop the Flip Flop Frog, and then here they do draw Frozen Soul, which unfortunately is not live because our life points are too high. So if they hadn't been attacking with the Death Frog or with the Unifrog, this would be perfectly valid for them, but unfortunately it is not going to be enough at this point. So here we are going to hit an Armory to get a Supervise. That's going to give us Lonefire into Copy Plant. And then we are going to Synchro Summon 7 for Black Rose Dragon. And we are going to be using Black Rose Dragon's effect here to just destroy everything on the field and bring back the Gigaplant. And then let us swing for 2400. Folks, I gotta say, I think a pretty big error here. Maybe I want a Heavy Storm first. If I had Heavy Stormed first, I would have been able to destroy the Frozen Soul. Our opponent would not have been able to chain it. And then I could have just used Black Rose's second effect to put one of the Dupe Frogs in attack, Mark of the Rose to the second one, and walked over it for game with Gigaplant and Titanial. Obviously, I didn't know that it was a dead Frozen Soul, so I thought that maybe this would be a little bit cleaner, and instead we're just going to give our opponent a little bit more of a chance to win, and they definitely have that chance drawing something like Substitute. They still have all their Swap Frogs back in deck, so that's going to be able to allow them to turn that Fishborg Blaster on. You know, all they have to do now is just Substitute, get Swap Frog, bounce Swap Frog, discard Fishborg to summon itself, and then bounce it again, and then you can maybe Moray. I think that might be a little better. Instead, our opponent is going to decide to Moray right away. I don't know if maybe they were just a little tilted because I cleared their dupe lock. Not super sure. They also now have 2 Dupe Frogs in their graveyard, so all they have left is a soft dupe lock that they could potentially make. Now we have used our Black Rose, so you know, who's to say if that is really as safe as it could be. Anyways, now our opponent is going to go ahead and fire the 1-for-1 for the Fishborg Blaster. And there they are going to Substitute tributing itself. They're going to get Death Frog online here, and then they are going to make a Bryanak of all things, which they are going to use to clear our Gigaplant and attack in for 2300. So we are seeing that, you know, this deck definitely has teeth. It's a really good thing that we have our Mark of the Rose, because that is going to give us the comeback potential that we need. Here we are going to draw a hidden Armory for turn, which is just a fantastic draw because that means that we are going to have lethal. We're going to Bryanak to clear the Dupe Frog, and then we are going to hidden Armory for DDR. And that is going to be DDR for Lonefire Blossom for 2800 damage, just like that. You know, I'm resolving the Dandelion here. And our opponent is going to give us the GG, and that is going to be it. So we were able to handle Final Countdown Frogs. You know, it was just a matter of, okay, we realize they're on Final Countdown. We know what we have to do, and we have to execute. I do think Gigavise is really favored, and sometimes, you know, the weird little strategy that your opponent is trying to execute is just something that doesn't work super well against your deck. So let's go into this next game. Here, we see our opponent with Gren, Maju, and Soul Absorption, a couple Grinder Golems, a Return, and a True Nade. So definitely they're up to no good. They're just going to draw and pass, and we also are going to go ahead and hit an Armory for a Supervise, and then set our Threatening Roar. Don't want to commit the Mirror Force as well into something like a Heavy Storm. And now our opponent is going to show off what they're up to, firing the Soul Absorption, and then firing a Gold Sark for Necroface. And, you know, once again, this is where I'm having my, oh geez, here we go kind of moment, right, folks? So we're both going to banish 5 cards off the top of our deck. I do see the DD Dynamite, so now that is telling me what our opponent is trying to do, what their win condition is. They're gaining a bunch of life points off Soul Absorption, so they're going to live a really long time. They're going to be hard to kill, and then they're going to try and DD Dynamite us to close out the game. So they're going to set the Gren Maju. It is going to get to be our turn, and we are going to go ahead and Super Solar to get our Lonefire. We're going to tribute Lonefire for another Lonefire for a Gigaplant here. We are going to get a Supervise on the Gigaplant, and I am concerned about what this back row could be. So folks, I do go for the Stardust Dragon here. If I had gone for a little bit bigger of a push, maybe, you know, we might be able to close out the game a little sooner. But unfortunately, you know, I was trying to play around Torrential Mirror Force, that kind of stuff. And we do attack once into the Gren Maju, which does have just enough stats for the Gigaplant to bounce off of it. So we're going to get to clear it with the Stardust, but we are definitely behind. Absolutely. Here, our opponent is going to draw another Gold Sark, which they are going to use to banish a Tragodia this time. Interesting. And then they are going to flip the Return from the Different Dimension, which I'm going to look carefully at what they have here, and I am actually going to decide to let that go. Definitely a questionable choice, you know, folks. I think probably would just be better to go ahead and Solemn Judgment that, but instead, you know, I was feeling like, well, Spirit Reaper, you know, we could stop, we can Mirror Force if they do try and attack, so I was feeling a little bit safe. But now our opponent is going to Giant Trunade to clear our back row, and that is going to force us to use the Solemn Judgment. Then our opponent is going to go ahead and use Tragodia to steal our Stardust Dragon. So much for our good ideas with Mirror Force. Instead, we're just going to be forced to Threatening Roar, and then watch as our opponent gets to banish 5 more cards off of the top of our deck and gain 1,000,000 more life points with Necroface. So I'm definitely kicking myself here for not Solemn Judgmenting the Return. That's one of the most powerful cards in the game. Definitely super greedy, a little arrogant of me to think that Threatening Roar, Mirror Force were enough to keep around, especially when then they fired the Trunade anyways. So what are you going to do, folks? Here, our opponent is going to be passed back to us, and we do have that Stardust Dragon to deal with. I am feeling pretty encouraged here because the game state is awful simplified, and we do have a Gigaplant, which is live. So we are going to Gigaplant into Lonefire Blossom here, and we can't go into Titanium. We can't go into another Gigaplant. So instead, I am thinking, all right, well, let's go into a Dandelion off of, and then we are going to go ahead and Mark of the Rose to steal our Stardust back. Opponent gains another 500 off of that. We're going to hit in for big damage. And then we are going to just go end phase and pass it back. Not 100% sure if that was the best play, folks. I think probably Nettles into maybe a Brute Drago might have been a little stronger. We would retain the Mark of the Rose, but nevertheless, here our opponent is going to draw a DD Dynamite. We are going to go ahead and flip the Mirror Force on the Stardust Dragon attack. I want to keep the Gigaplant, and if they chose to negate it there, then we would be able to bring the Stardust back to our side of the field. Of course, they don't do anything like that, and then they're just going to pass it back to us. Here we get a fantastic draw, which is going to be DDR. Really going to give us a big, huge push here. So we are going to fire the DDR, and at this point, our opponent is going to chain DD Dynamite, which is going to do 300 damage for each of my removed from play cards. So that would just be 3,300 points of damage. And folks, I got to tell you, I read the card wrong. I read it incorrectly. I thought it counted our opponent's banished cards as well. So I do go ahead and scoop the game up after that. So Definitely a mistake there. Definitely a good lesson to just read your opponent's cards. Definitely was a winnable game, but I'm feeling pretty confident. Okay, after side, we are going to be able to win. So here we are going to go ahead and upstart twice and then fire a hidden armory to get a supervise, so we can hopefully get things going just a little bit. We're just going to set the Raigeki break and pass it back to our opponent. I'll be honest, folks, seeing this slow hand like this, I was not feeling great. I was like, oh geez, now we gotta answer everything. And speaking of things to answer, our opponent is going to start off with a D-Fissure, which is really, really strong against us. And even worse, we're going to top deck into a Titanial, which is going to be absolutely no help. Our opponent is going to set a Gren Maju, and then we are going to be forced to pass after drawing a DDR and banish for hand size. I think this is going to be a really cute way to get the Gigaplant online. I'm thinking, okay, we at least have some activity potential here. In the future, we can Giant Trunade to bounce the fissure, and then we'll be able to DDR, discarding the Titanial, give Gigaplant the supervise, bring back Titanial if we're not finding our way into other plants. What our opponent does find his way into is in Allure of Darkness, but with no darks in hand, he is just going to pass it back to us. We do draw a Super Solar Nutrient, and then here I'm thinking, okay, well, our opponent is just kind of setting and passing. I think we can wait a little bit. We can wait a little bit to try and get just a little bit something else going. Here our opponent is going to set the other Gren Maju and then pass it back to us. We draw another Miracle Fertilizer, and I am going to set the Mark of the Rose here. Again, just trying to not lose anything to hand size. Now our opponent draws a Lava Golem. That's going to go really well with that Owner's Seal they have. And then here we find our way to a Decree. We'll set the Decree and again pass. I'm just looking for a little more gas before I commit to the board. Giant Trunade isn't a permanent answer to Dimensional Fissure. So here we do find a permanent answer to Dimensional Fissure. But again, especially because we have the SSN, I really want to find a Lonefire Blossom and then just win the game on the spot. Our opponent is going to pass back to us. We are going to find a Solemn Judgment. So now I'm feeling, okay, this is really good. All we have to do is find our way to Lonefire, and then we can win the game. Our opponent sets another card for hand size on their own. And then here we go. We finally do find our way into Lonefire Blossom. And I am going to once again pass just to see if we can get an extra normal summon off. If our opponent doesn't seem to want to be attacking, that's really fine with me. If they do attack, we can chain MST to get rid of the D-Fissure, so this will go to the graveyard. Then we'd be able to Miracle Fertilizer, bring back the Copy Plant, and then use Giant Trunade before we SSN, and then we have 2 fertilizers. So what I was thinking here with set and passing and not trying to win immediately was just, like, I want to win the game on the spot. We have so many good tools here. Like, we're definitely going to be in a really good position. Instead, our opponent is going to creature swap, which is definitely a little annoying. I'm thinking, okay, well, there goes my level 1 plant for Super Solar, and also now at this point, I am going to want to MST the D-Prison or D-Fissure immediately, just in case our opponent tries to Synchro Summon or do something with our Copy Plant. We've got to shut that down. We draw a Gold Sark for turn, which is pretty decent draw here. And we are going to go ahead and Gold Sark for Lonefire Blossom just to find it directly, and then we're going to pass our turn. Maybe we could have flipped summoned the Gren Maju and swung over the Copy Plant, but I ultimately decided not to do that. Here our opponent is going to Trunade, and I think carefully, but I do decide to go ahead and not flip the Solemn Judgment. Instead, our opponent is just going to Synchro Summon with our Copy Plant. So Necroface off the field. They have the Spirit Reaper. It looks like they're just trying to attack over that Gren Maju they gave us and then try and rip something out of our hand. Never feels good to get your hand ripped, but with a hand size this large, it might not be the end of the world. They do hit something pretty good there with the Miracle Fertilizer, and now it is going to be our turn. Let's see if we can crack back and win. We draw a Foolish Burial, which is just going to be a really fantastic draw. So just to start things off immediately, we're going to fire the Giant Trunade. I can't really afford to be greedy without the Royal Decree Solemn Judgment set, so we're going to have to Trunade immediately. Our opponent is going to Wabaku, so that is a little frustrating for me because we're not going to be able to win the game on this turn, but I do want to do my best to clear out their board as much as I can. So we're going to Super Solar for a Lonefire Blossom, and then Lonefire Blossom for Gigaplant. Unfortunately, with our other Gigaplant banished, that means that that second Lonefire Blossom is not so useful. We're just going to normal summon the Gigaplant here, and then go ahead and go right into a Power Tool Dragon. Of course, Power Tool isn't going to be able to attack. I'm just thinking, all right, well, if we can't win on this turn, maybe we can win on the next turn. So we'll get a Mark of the Rose. And now with 2 Mark of the Roses, I'm perfectly comfortable using 1 to clear the Spirit Reaper. We're going to set our Judgment, set our Decree, and give it back to our opponent. Here, our opponent is going to go ahead and Lava Golem us. So I'm definitely not feeling nearly as confident as I was after getting hit with a Lava Golem. And even worse, they are going to Owner's Seal to take their Lava Golem back, then hit us for 3,000 points of damage. They're not going to set the Dynamite or the Return. I guess they want to not risk losing those. They want to save them for a little later. And they're feeling like they are in a pretty strong spot. Our opponent also has a ton of life points at 11,200. Here we are going to draw a Heavy Storm for turn. And now, we haven't done one of these in a while. Go ahead, pause the video. Let me know what line you guys would take to win the game. We have a Lonefire Blossom where we'll advance to standby phase to make sure that we get our Lonefire Blossom. So we see all the resources, all your options. This is everything we have in the graveyard. This is everything banished, and this is our hand. Your challenge, folks, is to win the game on this turn. Can you do it? Show me if you can. So here we go. Assuming you have taken the time to find the line, this is your last chance. 3, 2, 1. Let me show you the line that I ended up taking. It did take me a little bit to find this line, but I was able to do it after some thought. First, we are going to Miracle Fertilizer for Gigaplant, and then we are going to go ahead and supervise the Gigaplant to bring out Lonefire Blossom. Lonefire Blossom is going to tribute Gigaplant to summon Nettles, and then Supervise is going to go ahead and bring back the Gigaplant. We are going to Mark of the Rose, banishing Copy Plant, very important, to take the Magical Android. We're going to switch Magical Android to attack position, and then we are going to Heavy Storm to give them back their Magical Android, DDR for Copy Plant, and then we are going to be able to Armory Arm-Colossal Fighter OTK with the Armory Arm on the Magical Android. We need exactly 4 swings with Colossal Fighter to close out the game. And we do not have enough life points to do that into Lava Golem, so we had to get the Magical Android into attack position. I hope you guys were able to find that line. Let's go into game number 3 now and see if we are able to close out against this very annoying DD Dynamite banish deck. So we open a pretty good hand here, especially against a slower deck like our opponents. Gold Sark is Lonefire Access. I'm seeing 2 Ferts. I'm seeing Supervise. Our opponent is going to start off with a strong hand of their own, setting some stall, setting some interruptions. They have Battle Fader ready to go in their hand. So definitely a lot of threats are present. We are going to upstart right away and find another Supervise, which I feel like that's just fantastic. 2 Supervise, 2 Miracle Fertilizer, Lonefire coming in 2 turns. It's going to be very difficult for our opponent to OTK us. They can't even, Necroface to clear out too many of our equips. So all of our really good cards are nice and safe in our hand. We are going to even draw Heavy Storm for turn. The same turn we get our Lonefire Blossom. So that's just about as good as it gets. We are going to Heavy Storm to clear out their back row. Of course, they'll chain the Wabaku, and I say that is perfectly fine. I am going to go ahead and establish a little bit of a board here, just a Titanial. I want to hold my Supervises. I know Lava Golem is a threat, so I want to play around Lava Golem and instead just get a little bit of board presence right away. Now, here our opponent is going to punish that Not with a lava golem, but with a creature swap. So we'll take 2800, and now we have to try and get through a Titanial of our opponents. So super annoying. Titanial, obviously a very, very good card against Gigavise, but unfortunately for our opponent, we have all the gas in the world. We're going to fire not one, but two Miracle Fertilizers, Giant Trunade to get them both back to our hands. And then we are going to get a Gigaplant going. Our opponent is going to allow the Supervise equip. So I say, hey, fantastic. Let's just keep pushing our luck while we can. We are going to go ahead and make a Power Tool Dragon. And Power Tool Dragon, we're going to be looking for a Mark of the Rose. That seems to me to be the cleanest way to get the Titanial off the field before we commit any further. Our opponent is going to actually allow us to take the Titanial. I guess they're feeling really, really safe with the Battle Fader. And they're kind of hoping that, okay, we'll leave the Titanial up, they'll Battle Fader, and then they'll get the Titanial back. So definitely an interesting choice here. And that is what our opponent is going to. Main phase 2, we're going to go ahead and give the Gigaplant a Supervise, and we're going to Lonefire Blossom, tributing the Titanial so we don't have to give it back to our opponent. And then we are going to pick up a Nettles, which we are going to make a Black Brute Drago with, just trying to put up a very strong, threatening board for our opponent to try and deal with. Here they draw a Wabaku as well as a DD Dynamite, so that's going to be really fantastic for them. They're going to Smashing Ground to clear out the Brute Drago. Of course, that means we get a Gigaplant back, and then we are going to end phase Decree, and that is going to be GG. So Royal Decree putting in a lot of work in this game. And now let me show you this third match we have. These alt-win-con matches, they do run pretty long. This deck, I think, is the coolest thing just about possible, imaginable. Look at that. That is our opponent on main decked Marionette Mite. What could they possibly be up to? Well, let's find out. Here we open a little slow. Not sure why we're not setting the Raigeki break there. I guess we're just trying to represent Gores. And here our opponent is going to Iron Blacksmith to get Vengeful Servant. So maybe the more perceptive folks of you at home are going to see what our opponent is up to. They're going to hit an Armory for another Vengeful Servant, and then we are going to take 500 big points of damage directly to the face. Our opponent is going to set their Econ, which is definitely going to insulate them, but instead we are just going to be forced to set our Mirror Force and our Raigeki break. I've never seen this Vengeful Servant deck when I'm playing it, so I have no clue what our opponent is up to. And I am desperately trying to just not die. So definitely want to develop our traps, and I'm thinking, okay, we'll put together a big push when it's time to win, and then save the Heavy Storm for that. Speaking of time to win, we do draw a Supervise, so all we're looking for now is a Lonefire, a Foolish Burial, Dandelion, or one of our tuners. That'll get Lonefire access through SSN. And instead, our opponent is normal summoning the Marionette Mite. So now that I've seen the Mite, I've seen the Vengeful Servants, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to take a Fiend monster from us, give it to Vengeful Servants, and then pass it back to us and burn for the win. Here, we're going to draw Neos Alias. Clearly, we're on the Future Fusion build still here. And Alias is actually kind of, putting in work, not the end of the world. Here, our opponent is going to Brain Control, and we misclick and give them our Mirror Force, which is not so great. Now they know we have Mirror Force, and they are going to go ahead and attack in with both of these monsters. I'm going to be forced to flip the Mirror Force here. Not super excited about it, but I know they have two Vengeful Servants, and that'd be 38 plus 24, so that's way too much damage for me taking, so I am going to use the Mirror Force right away. Here we're going to Gold Sark, and that is going to get us to Lonefire. We'll fire the Heavy Storm now, and I'm thinking, okay, great, it's time to go off to the races. We are going to DDR, pitching the SSN. We're not going to need that anymore, and go ahead and get Lonefire into Lonefire. We are just going to try and end the game right now. Should be pretty easy to do, not even needing a definite hit or miss off of Power Tool. We still have our normal summon. Our opponent's life points are pretty low. And we are going to fire the roll. Of course, 66% is going to round up to 100%. What are we going to get? We do get the supervise. It's like a given at this point, honestly, I feel like. And then we are going to get Titanial up. I think Titanial feels really good here. It's going to be able to actually negate Vengeful Servant. And I'm saying, all right, we swing for game. And then, of course, our opponent is going to hit us with that nasty, nasty Battle Fader. So we're going to be forced to pass back to our opponent, at which point they are going to hit us with the big old Lava Golem. And then they're going to go ahead and mind control the Gigaplant, and then Marionite Mite the Lava Golem onto their side. I already know they have those Vengeful Servants, so I know that is GG, and I am going to go right to game 2. I do take the time to compliment my opponent. Like I said, I had never seen this deck before. I think it is pretty cool. I think it's definitely pretty innovative choice. And then here we are going to draw the very painful Foolish Burial, Neos, Alias, Future Fusion combo. So, you know, we're getting double duty here, even if the Fufu was live. And of course, it isn't live. So this is just a bad situation, no matter how you slice it. We're going to hit an Armory here, milling a DDR. And even though it's not my first choice, I am going to just go ahead and decide to pick up the DDR. So we are not down a card like that. It's also not the worst thing to have. If we do draw a Gold Sark, we would have the DDR over anything else. We're going to draw an MST. That up. That's going to be a nice little addition. And then we are going to go ahead and summon the Alias and just try and get in damage in any way we can before things get too out of control. Speaking of out of control, our opponent has drawn the Lava Golem. But good for us, we are going to get to Gold Sark at Lonefire Blossom. I am going to go ahead and attack in directly, not trying to commit immediately. I want to try and get our opponent as low as possible. Here they are going to Smashing Ground to clear out the Neos Alias before passing it back to us. I am going to go ahead and set the Book of Moon and pass. I'm thinking, all right, I just want to get that Lonefire to my hand. I don't want to use a DDR on it. It seems a little too costly. I want to be playing very conservatively. In end phase, I'm going to go ahead and Raigeki Break to get rid of that second set. And then I am going to go ahead and draw phase MST, just in case it is a dust shoot, so that we definitely get our Lonefire Blossom. So now I'm saying, hey, okay, you know, it's time to try and win. We'll upstart just to get our situation as good as possible. And I'm actually going to hit an Armory off that upstart to get a Supervise. And because we have the hidden Armory, and because I know our opponent is doing something funky, we are going to go ahead and try and find game another way. So this is just like the strongest board I could come up with. Our opponent is going to have Wabaku to live another turn, and then they are going to set a nice little bluffed Minecon. We are going to be playing right on into it. So we are going to go ahead and Lonefire for another Lonefire for a Gigaplant, and then we will Supervise, bring back the Lonefire. Nothing out of the ordinary here. We're just going to go right for Titanial. That is going to be enough damage for game. And our opponent, of course, is going to have the Battle Fader. And then look at that, very threatening. They've got that Lava Golem, Marionette Mite ready for us. They do have an enemy controller as well. They're going to fire the Trunade immediately. I'm happy to see that. At the very least, I get my Mark of the Roar, my Supervise back. And here our opponent is going to go ahead and Lava Golem us, Marionette Mite to take the Lava Golem. I'm forced to just hope that they don't have Vengeful Servant, and indeed they don't. So we are going to get the Lava Golem back. We will take 1,000 damage and stand by. But this very well could be enough to survive. So we're going to Gold Sark to banish a Gigaplant, and then use Gigaplant to start our combo. Even if we hadn't drawn that Gold Sark, we still had Mark of the Rose on the Battle Fader. But this just does feel a little bit cleaner. So we're going to go ahead and bring back the Titanial, and then just try once again to swing for game. Our opponent doesn't have a Battle Fader. We are going into game number 3. really exhausting playing against these kind of decks. So our opponent is going to go first, and they are going to draw the Gold Sarcophagus, banishing a Giant Trunade, just trying to find a nice, clear way to win the game there. They already have a Vengeful Servant and a Lava Golem. The enemy controller is going to be a good way to steal the Lava Golem back, and they're going to get another Vengeful Servant off that Iron Blacksmith. So we're definitely on the clock. We are definitely in trouble. We are going to be able to Gold Sarc for Lonefire, so that is at least a little bit of a silver lining. And of course, our opponent is going to go ahead and Iron Blacksmith and get themselves to that Vengeful Servant. They'll hit us for 500 little points of damage, and then they are going to Cyber Valley for 2 cards. This is going to be our first turn off Lonefire, but I smell blood in the water. They have 1 set. Let's clear that away. If it's not a Waboku, which of course it isn't, we are going to be able to go right on ahead and DDR for that Lonefire into a second Lonefire, into Gigaplant, into Nettles, and wanting to play around a Battle Fader and not overcommit into Lava Golem, I actually just go ahead and swing instead of pushing for game. So trying to consider what my opponent could be doing and play around it. We're just going to make a Brute Draco, and then we are pass with another combo enabler ready to go for the next turn. Here our opponent is going to get their Giant Trunade, but of course that's not going to help them. We don't have anything in the way. They're going to just summon a Cyber Valley to try and stall out, and we are going to draw a Dandelion for turn. So now at this point I'm thinking, all right, let's just try and close out the game. Looks like our opponent didn't have Battle Fader, and we're just we're at a point where we've got to commit, we've got to win. So we are going to go ahead and make a Power Tool Dragon. Power Tool Dragon here just needs to find us a Mark of the Rose, and that will clear the Cyber Valley. And if we miss, we hit a Supervise and we get another chance. But of course, 66% is rounding up to 100%. We're going to get to our Cyber Valley from our opponent, and then that is going to be GG. So this deck is definitely scary, definitely a really cool deck, but you know, just staying calm, executing your combos, you are able to. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you made it this far, please subscribe. The channel continues to grow, and it makes me so happy to keep bringing you guys daily episodes of Shameless Hypebeast Gigavise Combo. This has been Dionysus, aka Young Puds, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. All right, take care.